Next up is Jonathon Troughton, the CEO of FramePlay. Now, this is a true masterclass on video game advertising. You'll walk away understanding the top things that video game developers care about and how it affects their decision to place your ads in their games. Jonathon, the stage is yours.
Hi, I'm Jonathon Troughton, CEO and co-founder of FramePlay. I'm here today at AdWorld to talk to you about how to get in-game advertising right and what's important to game developers. So my history in gaming and my background really comes, if you want to look at it from a player perspective, it goes back to when I was a child. My very first console was a Nintendo Entertainment System. But the thing that sparked it, the bit that really got me into the entire realm of gaming, was the Nintendo 64 and GoldenEye and Mario Kart. And that really got the social element of it going and playing multiplayer. And then as I got a little bit older, it became LAN parties. And I'd always be saving up, and my friends would be saving up for who could get the newest, fastest, biggest Switch with more ports on it, so we can have more people coming over. And it turns into an all-day, sometime multiple night event of just 24-hour gaming, bulk candy, and it was something you really look forward to. It was the social element was so fun, and as things got progressed and technology got better, it changed, and that sort of like enters 2017 in PUBG, and I was playing. Actually, I was playing online, and if you're familiar with it, you're randomly matched, and I was randomly matched with Rossi458, my co-founder. And back then, there used to be a Red Bull can, and this Red Bull can was fully immersed inside the game. That was removed, and the second it was removed, we were like, why? Why would this be removed from this experience? It's so well done. It's part of it. And we noticed it, a lot of people noticed it, but the difference was we said, this is how advertising should be done, right? It should be fully immersed inside the game, and it should not break the experience of the player. It should be conducive. It should be something that you take notice of. And I've spent thousands of hours immersed in virtual worlds, and this was how it was done best, and this is how we thought maybe the industry should be doing it. And that has really resonated, especially when you're looking at the size of the audience that is, or the size of the player base that is gaming every single day. In the US alone, you're talking Super Bowl audiences every day that are playing games. So when we look at that and we sort of tell this story to people and say, you've got this many people playing, and they say, well, maybe it's a 15-year-old boy in a basement. It's not anymore. I mean, it was at one point. But now the diversity in games is as diverse as the human race. So that's why we're going to talk about how you get in-game advertising done right. So video games, not like other experiences. They're not like other formats. It's definitely not the web. So we need to be very cognizant of that when we're thinking about how to engage players inside of these experiences. It's not like TV. It's not a lean-back experience. You're not disengaged. Gaming is the complete opposite. Players are leaning into the experience. Players are immersed. They're interacting. They're present. They're present inside that experience. So if you're thinking about an experience or a game where the player is engaged and leaning in, you really need to put the player first. You need to put the gamer first. So when thinking about advertising in this channel, we really need to think about it very differently to all other channels. So why can't you just slap an ad into a game? Like, why not? Well, there's a couple of things that video game developers are really, really passionate and cognizant of when they're thinking about how things are done inside the games. So what do they care about? What business metrics do game developers really, really drive and care about inside of their games? What are the key considerations? And what creative resonates with players? Because at the end of the day, all of this impacts player experience. So a couple of things that they really think about. What are they? Time spent. Time spent, I think, in any medium is very important, but it is extremely important in video games. It really dictates the success of a title entirely. So if you can create in a world, you create an experience, you're creating visuals that really drive player experience, a positive player experience, and you take things into consideration like core loop mechanics. How are core loop mechanics feeding? How is the creative feeding into the core loop mechanics to keep that player happy and engaged and inside that environment? Now that's going to lead directly into retention. And this is something that you may have heard around the game space. Retention is vital to the game's success. We're no longer talking about D1 and what it is beyond that. We're talking like, how do we get to D180? How do we keep a player in there day after day, excited and engaged, part of that environment? So when you're talking about retention and you're thinking about why it's so important to game success, anything that can impact that retention negatively is not going to be of interest to a game developer. So when we talk about doing ads right and being part of an immersive environment and thinking about how that impacts a player's experience, which in turn impacts the game developer, retention is at the top of their mind. Because if you can get retention right, you're going to reduce your UA costs. So if you think of UA or user acquisition, it's very expensive. Now, whether you're paying for it or it's organic, it is still very expensive and a user is very valuable. So retention directly impacts UA. And the longer you're keeping somebody in here, it's going to drive loyalty. Now, whether you're driving loyalty to a game or to a game franchise, or you're turning that loyalty around to a brand that is now being seen inside a game, it's vital to the game developer. So what else can affect the experience? Because at the end of the day, this is what we're talking about. It's experience and making sure that the player is really being put first and their experience is put first. And something that gets overlooked very frequently is the performance. If I'm playing a game, even now, more so when I was a kid, but even now, I'm looking at my frames per second. How many frames per second is my device putting out? Is it smooth? Because that's what it really comes down to. Frames per second equates to fluidity of the game. Is it stuttering? Is it jumping? Because if it's stuttering and jumping, it's going to create a very negative experience for me. Am I losing compared to other people in the game? Am I doing worse? So a game developer is hyper conscious when it comes to performance and how something is going to impact that performance. Because at the end of the day, if it impacts the experience, it impacts retention, and that's going to impact the bottom line. So when we start talking about optimizing frames per second or FPS, some things that come to mind don't work in that space is OpenRTB. OpenRTB is not optimized for games at all. It may be in the future, but right now it definitely isn't. So if OpenRTB is impacting performance, it's not aligning to context, it's not aligning to artwork, well, effectively what you're saying is you're putting bad ads into a game. And a bad ad is going to impact experience. It's going to impact immersion. And at the end of the day, developers are going to pull you out because they cannot afford to do that. So when we're thinking about this and we're thinking about immersion, we're not thinking web ads. We're definitely not putting web into a video game. We need to really work together as an industry to make sure that the standards for gaming are lifted. So everybody is putting the player first and putting the game developer first to make sure that those experiences are really maintained. So what works for games? Again, I think I keep saying this, but it's about experience. So there's some best practices that need to be considered. So design, aesthetic, what type of messaging really resonates with game developers, but also the players. Strong visuals, enticing messaging with clear and really enticing logos. Remember, this isn't the web, so this is not a clickable environment. While it's not clickable, there's other elements to bring you that same performance capability, but it's not a clickable environment. You do not want to break them, or break that immersion, or break that experience and bring them out of the game. Just think back to when you have, if you're playing a mobile game, you have a 30-second video pop up in front of you in the middle of your game, and you're sitting there being forced 30 seconds and then having to find the little X somewhere that's being hidden to close it. How's that experience? It's not good. So we want to make sure that this is not the web being repeated inside of these environments. Like I said earlier, very different format. We need to be thinking about the player and their experience. But at the end of the day, players like seeing brands in game. They like seeing the brand respecting the gameplay, and they actually respond well to having those brands present in the game, as long as their play is being respected. So if we respect the gameplay and we actually are incorporated into the game itself, the players will have a positive loyalty effect transferred to the brands now as well. So I guess some key takeaways here. Video games are a very different channel. It's very immersive. It's a lean in. It is interacting. It's present. It's engaged. So it's a lean in experience. When you're advertising in video games, you really need to think about the experience, the type of creative, the bold logos, the enticing messaging. We need to incorporate that into the creative. And if everybody does this together and the industry works to make sure that the standard and quality is lifted for all of the players out there, everybody's going to win. The player's going to win, the developer's going to win, and at the end of the day, you're going to win, the advertiser. You're going to be able to reach this enormous audience. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm looking forward to working with you all.